Snoofettes, quiet now. I'm going to tell a story. Once upon a dream, an old miller died, and he left all he owned to his 3 sons. To the oldest he left his mill, to his 2nd son his 2 donkeys, and to the youngest son he left his cat. It was a large and handsome ginger cat of some magnificence. The youngest son said sadly, "My brothers can make a living with what they've inherited, but what can I do with a dumb cat?" But this was no ordinary cat, and he understood every word. "Don't worry, master," the cat said. "Just give me an old flour sack and a pair of riding boots." The miller's youngest son, delighted that the cat could talk, did as Puss in Boots asked. Puss put on the boots and swung the sack over his shoulder. In the forest, he put some lettuce leaves in the sack and soon caught a fat young rabbit. Puss in Boots went to the king's palace. Since nobody had seen a cat walking on its hind legs before, wearing boots and talking like a man, they let him in to see the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "please accept this wild rabbit as a gift from my master, the Duke of Carabas." The king was amused by the talking cat and happily accepted the gift. The next day, Puss returned to the palace, this time with a pair of pheasants. Again, the king was happy to receive a gift from the amazing talking cat. The cat continued to bring the king gifts for many weeks. Each time he brought something different. He was cleverly snaring all sorts of game with the flour sack. One day, Puss came to his master and said, "If you do exactly as I say, our fortune will be made. Just go for a swim in the river and leave the rest to me." It seems the cat had heard something interesting in the palace kitchens. He was now such a familiar sight that the cooks made him welcome and chatted openly in his company. They said that the king was planning to go for a ride down by the river in his handsome carriage. So the king drove down to the river, his beautiful daughter sitting beside him. And who should he see swimming there? Why, the young miller's son, of course. "Help!" cried Puss in Boots. "My master, the Duke of Carabas, is drowning!" The king, who now trusted the cat, stopped his carriage and ordered his guards to rescue the handsome young man from the river. Puss had secretly hidden his master's clothes, and while the guards were helping his master, he told the king that some thieves had stolen his master's fine frock coat and breeches. The king ordered one of his guards to run back to the palace and bring some suitably splendid clothes for the young duke. Once the miller's son was dressed in this finery, the king invited him to ride in the royal carriage. The duke, who was, you remember, really only a miller's son, chatted politely with the princess and her father, the king. He was charming and amusing and made such a fuss of the beautiful princess. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots ran ahead. He saw a group of peasants mowing hay in a fine field beside the road. The cat asked the mowers to tell the king that his land belonged to the Duke of Carabas. The peasants found this talking cat very amusing, but they told him the meadow belonged to a dreadful ogre. The ogre will certainly kill us all if he caught us telling such a lie. Don't worry, the cat told them. I will take care of the ogre. Everyone the king met upon the road said the same thing, that the fields and woods all belonged to the duke. And the king was very impressed. He had never met such a charming and wealthy young man. His daughter, the princess, was equally smitten. Puss in Boots, who was still some way ahead of the king's carriage, finally reached the castle of a huge and monstrous ogre. He boldly went up to the ugly monster who stood on the drawbridge, leaning against the great stone gatehouse. "Meow," he said as he sauntered onto the drawbridge. The ogre reached down to stroke him. "Is it true, O greatest of ogres, that you can change yourself into any animal you like?" The ogre, who was shocked that the cat could talk and taken off guard, said, "Yes, I can make myself into any creature, even a lion." And instantly he transformed into a lion and roared loudly. "Rah!" The cat jumped back, pretending to be frightened. "I bet you can't change yourself into a mouse," the cat taunted the ogre, who was indignant. He roared, still being a lion, and transformed himself into a little mouse. The cat suddenly pounced and snapped up the mouse in one bite. Puss in Boots licked his lips and thought to himself, that must have been the tastiest ogre that anyone has ever eaten. He trotted back along the road and soon met the king's carriage coming the other way. There was laughter and giggling coming from the carriage as the miller's son told the king and his daughter funny stories. The cat bowed to the king and said, "Your Majesty, the Duke's castle is just up the road from here. Would you care to join him for a feast?" The miller's son, disguised as a duke, managed to hide his surprise at the cat's announcement. The king was happy to stop for refreshment, and the ogre's servants were too shocked to argue. The talking cat, the duke, and the grand king with his beautiful princess and well-armed guards stunned them into silence. So they laid on a splendid feast in no time. The king was enchanted with the youngest of the miller's sons, and his daughter soon fell in love with the handsome and charming young fellow. The duke and princess were married. The duke, no longer a miller's poor son, took the ogre's lands and castle for his own and became a great lord. And the talking cat, Puss in Boots, was treated like royalty by his grateful master. The duke, the princess, and Puss in Boots lived happily for the rest of their days.